Did you see the Gallup stats on sadness? Their 2026 State of the Global Workforce report is out, and it reported that 23% of the surveyed employees globally reported feeling sad. They felt sad most of the prior day. That's what they reported. Welcome to this mini but mighty leadership lesson, where every week we publish a brief but impactful lesson to help you level up personally and professionally. At Boss at the Helm, we believe each of us has a leader inside, and it's up to us to start with ourselves. Lead yourself, then lead others. In this episode, we're going to focus on sadness and what it means for us in life and at work if so many people are reporting feeling sadness. I was quite derailed by this information. It's a statistic that I haven't really paid attention to. They've been reporting on this since about 2006, where global sadness was originally reported at about 18%. Now, why didn't I notice this? I was focused in another direction. I usually spend a lot of time talking about engagement and how engagement keeps falling for employees because their managers are disengaged. But this year, the data struck me differently, and I noticed the numbers on sadness and loneliness. Gallup says they're measuring universal elements of well-being that differentiate a thriving life from one spent suffering. Their words. And this includes career, social, financial, physical, and community well-being. To be fair, the report provides much greater detail about life evaluation and thriving, but it's these negative daily emotions that I really noticed and that we're going to talk more about here today, particularly sadness. Because it's a lot of sadness, a lot of people feeling a lot of sadness. The survey question is, did you experience the following feeling a lot of the day yesterday? And then they insert an emotion. And in this case, when the question is, did you experience feeling sadness a lot of the day yesterday? 23% said yes. I mean, I can sort of get the loneliness percentage also being reported high because we're increasingly disconnected in life and at work, despite being more technologically connected than ever. But the sadness thing, it really breaks my brain. Some call sadness a negative emotion. In fact, it's listed as a negative emotion in this research. That always felt wrong to me. And so don't walk away from this mini but mighty leadership lesson thinking that we're not supposed to feel sad or we have to eradicate all sadness. That's not it. I think as compared to rage or apathy, sadness feels like a gentler emotion that comes situationally. And it's the situationally part that I think is really critical here. Because the question asked, did you feel it a lot of the day yesterday? Now, when I first saw this data and began looking at it, I made an erroneous assumption that Gallup was reporting that workers were sad because of the workplace. And that is not the case. That was my mistake. So when I started looking a little bit closer in the information and used AI to challenge thinking and find more information, I was better able to understand that it's really reporting on global well-being. And that includes things like economic stability, daily living conditions, and social support, which you could bring with you into the workplace. Keep in mind, there are other things we need to factor in, like engagement and manager engagement, which really do play into how satisfied you are at work. But this report is really saying that it's looking at the whole system, a well-being both in life and at work. Now, given that context, where would you imagine that the highest sadness results would be in the world? Where would we find the highest percentage of sadness reported? What about the lowest? Take a minute and think, which geographical areas or countries come to mind as potentially the saddest? Acknowledging that I've got a lot of personal biases in my thinking around this, I would have assumed that geopolitical conflicts would significantly influence this sadness finding. I'd have put Palestine and Israel and Lebanon and neighboring territories, some of our African countries that are also going through a lot of conflict, or the Ukraine and Russia who've been at war for years. I'd even have thrown the USA in there because it has been a real mess here lately. Nevertheless, according to Gallup, post-Soviet Eurasia, which includes a variety of countries, including the Ukraine and the Russian Federation, reported 19% sadness and 16% loneliness. And when you drill into that data, the Russian Federation has stayed pretty much at the same, reporting 18% sadness, and the Ukraine has hovered around 30%. And the kicker here is they're both less sad than South Asian countries. That's what the data shows. What about Palestine? They showed a 6 percentage point increase between 2024 and 2025, raising their sadness to 28%. So more people did report being sad. Israel reported 32% sadness in 2025, which is higher than the Russian Federation, Palestine, Ukraine. The USA holds steady at 22% sadness reported. But none of these is the highest rate of sadness. Instead, what Gallup calls South Asia, which includes Afghanistan, Bangladesh, India, Nepal, Pakistan, and Sri Lanka, they reported 36% of respondents felt a lot of sadness the prior day. This is incredible data. So all of us working as global citizens need to sit up and pay attention to the sadness and loneliness data. But those of us who manage and lead team members, those of us who have colleagues who are in these South Asian countries, we really need to pay attention to this statistic. Here's my simple rendition, just kind of mapping out from most sadness reported to least of the different countries that Gallup reports on, where they ranked when it came to sadness and loneliness in this 2026 report. So Gallup says that negative emotions remain elevated compared to before 2020, the pandemic year, suggesting that there's either lasting psychological impacts from the pandemic or a new, more challenging status quo. And I'd be willing to bet that it doesn't have to be either or. It might be a combination of both that we're dealing with here. This, to me, with 36% sadness being reported in some countries, that means we have so much work to do as global citizens to find ways to lift each other up collectively. And as shareholders, investors, stakeholders, owners, executives, leaders, managers, and employees of different organizations at work, we've got to start taking the depth of these emotions into consideration. If there are so many employees experiencing sadness and loneliness, we're not going to successfully manage performance without paying heed to the emotions involved in it. At Boss at the Helm, our curricula focuses frequently on awareness, emotions, emotional regulation, and your ability to help coach others around this as well. Leadership isn't only about communication and problem solving and credit attribution or accountability. It is about greater self-awareness and intentional leadership with a big emphasis on traits and skills like emotional awareness and regulation, your emotional intelligence. So all of us know and recognize we have to emphasize people skills and people management in our organizations. When we're talking amongst our friends, one of the most common things we do is complain about the other people that we work with or the other people that we have to deal with as part of work. And that's why it's so important for each of us to begin with ourselves and work on our own behaviors, mindset, and skills, as well as teach those skills across our organization to our colleagues, to the people who are on our teams, particularly to our managers, so that we help our managers and leaders foster an environment that supports people. And that takes into account that some people are really going through stuff and they bring that stuff with them to work. As we continue to see pressure to do things faster, to get more efficient, we see teams merging, we see acquisitions, we see AI everywhere. And as we see AI taking on more and more of our tasks, it becomes more important than ever that we learn and teach the skills that matter most, the ones that machines can't learn. That means our focus on management and leadership has to turn into a focus on what we are calling peopleship. Peopleship is a practice of leading humans by shaping how people experience work and life. It drives better performance because it improves how we show up for ourselves and for each other. Remember, at Boss at the Helm, we say a boss is that unique individual who really uses their power for the good of themselves and those around them. So we're fostering peopleship. We're talking now about vibe coding humans. So not just management skills, but the humanity skills. Judgment, presence, awareness, and emotional regulation. We're adding more focus in on these skills and hoping that you will join us for yourself and those around you. Join us here next Friday, where we're going to continue talking about sadness and specifically look at what managers and leaders can do about sadness when it shows up in the workplace. Start with yourself, and then lead others. Be a boss. By the way, now is a great time for you to tap like and subscribe to this channel. Set your notifications so that you'll be alerted when a new episode comes out every Friday. We'll see you next week.